The knock came so faint against the howling wind that Ethan O'Neill nearly missed it altogether. And if he had, the woman standing on his porch would have frozen to death before morning. He crossed the rough-hewn floor of his cabin in 3 long strides, rifle in hand, because nobody came calling at this elevation during a blizzard unless they were desperate or dangerous. When he pulled open the heavy door, snow and ice blasted into his face, but through the white fury he saw her. A woman in widow's black collapsed against his doorframe, her lips blue and her eyes barely open. "Jesus!" Ethan breathed, dropping the rifle and catching her before she fell. She was light in his arms, too light, and he could feel her trembling violently through the layers of frozen fabric. He kicked the door shut behind him and carried her to the fire, laying her on the bearskin rug as gently as he could manage with his heart hammering in his chest. Her eyes fluttered as he began working at the frozen buttons of her coat. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My son." Ethan's head snapped toward the door. "You have a boy out there, horse," she managed. "Saddlebag." He did not hesitate. Ethan grabbed his heavy coat and plunged back into the blizzard, following the porch until he found the horse, a sturdy mare that had somehow made it up the mountain path. Strapped to the saddle was a bundle wrapped in blankets, and when Ethan pulled it free, he heard a small whimper. The boy could not have been more than 3 years old. Back inside, Ethan laid the child next to his mother and set to work stripping away their frozen clothes with the efficiency of a man who understood that minutes mattered. He had blankets warming by the fire, and he wrapped them both, checking fingers and toes for frostbite. The woman's feet were dangerously cold, but he thought she would keep all her toes if he could get her warm enough. The child woke first, his eyes wide and frightened as he looked up at the bearded stranger hovering over him. "Mama," he said, reaching for the woman. "Your mama's going to be fine," Ethan said, his voice gentler than it had been in the 5 years since he had fled to this mountain. "What's your name, son?" "Thomas," the boy whispered. "Well, Thomas, I'm Ethan. You and your mama are safe now." The woman's eyes opened fully then, and Ethan found himself looking into the deepest brown eyes he had ever seen. Even exhausted and half-frozen, she was beautiful, with dark hair that fell in waves around her pale face and delicate features that seemed too refined for the harsh wilderness of the Colorado Rockies. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger now. "I did not know where else to go. The storm came so fast and I saw the smoke from your chimney." "You came from Palisade?" Ethan asked, surprised. The town was a good 15 miles down the mountain, and in this weather it might as well have been 100. She nodded, pulling Thomas closer to her. "We left this morning. I thought we could make it to Grand Junction before the weather turned, but I was wrong." "What would possess you to travel in November?" Ethan asked, then caught himself. "I apologize. That is not my business. No, it is a fair question." She sat up slowly, keeping the blanket wrapped around herself and the boy. "My husband died 6 months ago. The bank took our house last week. I have family in Grand Junction, a cousin who said we could stay with her until I found work." Ethan stood and went to the stove, ladling soup from the pot that always simmered there into 2 bowls. "You need to eat, both of you. Then you need to sleep. The storm will not break for at least 2 days, maybe 3. "We cannot impose on you for that long," she protested, but her eyes went to the soup with unmistakable hunger. "You can and you will," Ethan said firmly, handing her a bowl and a spoon. "There is no imposing about it. You will die if you go back out there, and I will not have that on my conscience." She took the soup with trembling hands. "I am Penelope Davis. This is my son, Thomas, Ethan O'Neill." He settled into his chair, watching them eat. The boy devoured his soup with the single-minded focus of a hungry child, and Penelope ate more slowly. but he could see her savoring every spoonful. When they finished, Ethan gave them his bed, a simple frame piled high with furs and blankets, while he made himself comfortable by the fire. He told himself he was simply doing what any decent man would do. But as he lay there listening to Penelope's soft breathing, he felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for 5 long years. He had come to this mountain to escape the memories of the war, the things he had seen and done in the name of the Union cause. He had built this cabin with his own hands, trapped and hunted for his living, and spoke to no one except the occasional prospector or trapper who wandered through. He had convinced himself that he was content with his solitude, but now, with a woman and child sleeping in his bed, he realized how desperately lonely he had been. Morning brought no respite from the storm. Snow had drifted against the door, and Ethan had to dig his way out to tend to Penelope's horse, bringing the mare into the small stable he had built for his own animals. Thomas watched from the window, his small hands pressed against the glass. "Have you ever seen this much snow?" Ethan asked the boy as he shook the ice from his coat. Thomas shook his head, his eyes wide. "Mama says we used to live where it was warm before I was born." "Texas," Penelope said from the bed. She looked better this morning, color returning to her cheeks. "We moved to Colorado 3 years ago. My husband thought he could make a fortune in mining." Ethan heard what she did not say, the bitterness and disappointment in those words. A lot of men thought that. Most of them were wrong. "He was a good man," Penelope said quietly. "Just unlucky." Ethan nodded, not pressing. He made breakfast, flapjacks and bacon, and watched with satisfaction as they ate. The boy was warming to him, asking questions about the animals mounted on the walls, the rifle over the fireplace, the way Ethan split wood. "Can I help?" Thomas asked as Ethan prepared to bring in more firewood from the covered pile outside. "Thomas, do not bother Mr. O'Neill," Penelope said, but Ethan shook his head. "He is no bother. Come on, son. I will show you how to stack wood." They worked together in the sheltered area beside the cabin, Thomas carrying the smaller pieces while Ethan handled the logs. The boy chattered constantly, telling Ethan about his life in Palisade, his friends, the dog they had owned before his father died. "We had to give Rusty to the blacksmith," Thomas said sadly. "Mama said we could not take him with us." "That must have been hard," Ethan said. "Mama cried. She thought I did not see, but I did." Something tightened in Ethan's chest. He looked through the window at Penelope, who was tidying the cabin though he had told her to rest. She moved with quiet efficiency, and he found himself noticing the graceful line of her neck, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. The day passed slowly, as days do when one is confined inside by weather. Ethan taught Thomas how to play checkers using pieces he carved from wood, and Penelope mended his shirts without being asked, her needle moving with practiced skill. "You do not have to do that," Ethan said, watching her work. "I need to do something to repay your kindness," she replied. "Besides, these shirts are in desperate need of mending. I am not much good with a needle. I can see that." There was a hint of amusement in her voice, and it made him smile. That night, Ethan insisted they take the bed again while he slept by the fire. He lay awake listening to the wind howl and the fire crackle, thinking about the woman sleeping across the room. It had been so long since he had felt anything beyond the numbness he had cultivated since the war. He had seen too much death, caused too much death, and he had buried that part of himself that could feel deeply. But Penelope and Thomas were awakening something in him, something he had thought was dead. The second day of the storm brought cabin fever. Thomas was restless, racing around the small space until Penelope grew short with him. Ethan understood the boy needed to move, needed to play, so he cleared a space and showed him how to wrestle, teaching him basic holds while being careful not to hurt him. Penelope watched from the rocking chair, and when Ethan looked up, he caught her smiling. It was the first real smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her face, making her look younger, lighter. "He likes you," she said when Thomas finally exhausted himself and curled up on the rug for a nap. "He is a good boy. You have done well with him." It has not been easy, especially after David died. She looked down at her hands, twisting the simple wedding band she still wore. "He was sick for a long time. The doctor bills took everything we had." "What did he die of?" "Lung fever. He worked in the mines and it weakened him. When winter came last year, he just could not fight it off." Ethan wanted to reach out and take her hand, but he kept his distance. "I am sorry. So am I." She looked up at him, and he saw tears in her eyes. "I am sorry that Thomas will grow up without a father. I am sorry that I could not save our home. I am sorry that I have to rely on the charity of a cousin I barely know." "You have nothing to be sorry for," Ethan said firmly. "Life is hard. You are doing what you have to do to survive and to take care of your boy. There is no shame in that." She wiped at her eyes. "You are very kind, Mr. O'Neill." "Ethan, please." "Ethan then, and you must call me Penelope." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to Thomas's soft snores and the endless wind. Ethan found himself telling her about his own life, things he had not spoken of in years. He told her about the war, about the farm in Ohio where he had grown up, about the brother he had lost at Shiloh. "Is that why you came here?" Penelope asked gently. "To get away from the memories?" "Yes. I thought if I could just be alone, if I did not have to see people or talk to people, the memories would fade." "Did they?" "No. They just got louder in the silence." Penelope reached out then and took his hand. Her touch was warm, and Ethan felt something electric pass between them. "I understand," she said softly. "After David died, I wanted to hide too, but Thomas needed me, so I could not. You are stronger than I am." "I do not think so. I think you have been in pain and you did what you thought would help. There is no weakness in that." That night, Ethan could not sleep. He lay by the fire thinking about Penelope's hand in his, the warmth of her touch, the understanding in her eyes. He had been alone for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to connect with another person. It terrified him and thrilled him in equal measure. The third day brought a break in the storm. The wind died down, and though snow still fell, it was gentler now, almost peaceful. Ethan knew that by tomorrow, Penelope and Thomas would be able to continue their journey. The thought filled him with a desperate sadness he did not quite understand. They spent the day preparing for their departure. Ethan checked over the horse, making sure she was sound and well fed. He packed supplies for them, dried meat and hardtack, blankets and matches. Penelope watched him work, her expression unreadable. "You have been so generous," she said. "I wish there was some way to repay you." "There is no debt," Ethan said. "I am just glad I was here when you needed help." That evening, after Thomas went to sleep, Penelope and Ethan sat by the fire drinking coffee. The silence between them was heavy with things unsaid. "I do not want to go," Penelope said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's heart began to pound. "What? I know it is foolish. We have only known each other 3 days, but I feel safer here with you than I have felt since David died, maybe even before that." "It is not foolish," Ethan said, setting down his cup. "I do not want you to go either." Penelope turned to look at him, and in the firelight her eyes were luminous. "What are we going to do?" "I do not know. What about your cousin in Grand Junction?" "I have never met her. She married and moved away before I was born. She wrote to me after she heard about David, said we could come if we needed to, but I do not know if she really meant it or if she was just being polite." Ethan took a deep breath, his mind racing. "You could stay here, both of you. Here." but there is barely enough room for you. I could build another room. I could expand the cabin. I have the timber and the tools." The words came out in a rush, and he realized he had been thinking about this all day without admitting it to himself. "Thomas could have his own space, and you could have the bedroom. I would sleep out here." "Ethan, we could not ask you to do that. You are not asking, I am offering." He moved closer to her, close enough to see the pulse beating in her throat. "Penelope, I have been alone on this mountain for 5 years. I thought that was what I wanted, but these past 3 days have shown me how wrong I was. Having you and Thomas here, it has brought this place to life. It has brought me to life." "I feel it too," she whispered. "But it is too soon. David has only been gone 6 months. I know. I am not asking for anything more than what I said. You and Thomas stay here. You would have a roof over your heads, food to eat, and safety. I would ask nothing in return except your company. People will talk. There are no people up here to talk, and I do not care what they say in Palisade." Penelope looked toward the bed where Thomas slept, then back at Ethan. "Can I think about it tonight?" Of course. But when morning came, her answer was written on her face. "Yes," she said simply. "If you are certain, then yes, we will stay." The relief that flooded through Ethan was almost overwhelming. "I am certain." "Then we should discuss the arrangements properly. I will not take charity, Ethan. I will earn my keep. I can cook and clean, mend and sew. I can tend a garden in the summer and put up preserves. I can do laundry and make soap. Penelope, you do not have to. Yes, I do. I need to. Please understand." He did understand. She needed to feel useful, needed to maintain her dignity. "All right. But Thomas will need schooling. I can teach him to read and write, to do mathematics." "You can read." My mother was a school teacher. She made sure all her children could read and write and cipher. He smiled at the memory. She said an uneducated man was a slave to those who could think for him. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. They spent the next weeks settling into a routine. Ethan began work on the addition to the cabin, cutting and hauling timber, laying foundation stones. The weather was cold but clear, good working weather. Thomas followed him everywhere, handing him nails and tools, asking endless questions. Penelope transformed the cabin. She scrubbed and cleaned, organized and arranged, until the rough bachelor quarters became a real home. She cooked meals that made Ethan's mouth water, stews and roasts and fresh bread that filled the cabin with warmth and delicious smells. In the evenings, she sewed by the fire while Ethan taught Thomas his letters. At night, Ethan lay by the fire and thought about the woman sleeping in his bed. His feelings for her grew stronger every day, but he was careful not to push, not to presume. She was a widow, still in mourning, and he would respect that. But sometimes he caught her watching him, and in her eyes, he saw something that gave him hope. December brought heavy snows that made working outside difficult, so Ethan focused on the interior work, framing walls and building furniture. He made Thomas a small bed of his own, carving animals into the headboard. The boy's delight made all the hours of work worthwhile. Christmas came, and Penelope decorated the cabin with pine boughs and berries. Ethan rode down to Palisade and bought fabric and candy, toys for Thomas, and thread for Penelope's sewing. The trip took 2 days, and when he returned, Penelope hugged him with such relief that it took his breath away. "I was worried," she said, her face pressed against his chest. "The snow was so heavy, and I thought, I am fine," he said, wrapping his arms around her. "I have been making this trip for years." But she did not let go, and neither did he. They stood there in the doorway with snow swirling around them, holding each other, and Ethan knew that what he felt for her had become something deep and true. On Christmas Eve, they sat by the fire after Thomas went to sleep, and Penelope gave Ethan a shirt she had made from fabric she had salvaged from her own dresses. It fit him perfectly, and the stitching was fine and even. "It is beautiful," he said, running his hand over the soft fabric. "You did not have to do this. I wanted to. You have given us so much, Ethan. A home, safety, kindness. This is a small thing." "It is not a small thing. It is the first gift anyone has given me in longer than I can remember." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I have something for you too." Inside was a cameo brooch, delicate and beautiful, with a woman's profile carved in ivory. Penelope gasped when she saw it. "Ethan, this is too much. It is not enough. It could never be enough for what you have given me." She pinned it to her dress, her hands trembling. "What have I given you? Hope. A reason to wake up in the morning, a reason to be a better man." Penelope looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw tears and something else, something that made his heart race. "Ethan, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I think I am falling in love with you." The words came out in a rush, as if she had been holding them back for a long time. "I know it is too soon. I know I should still be grieving David, but I cannot help what I feel. You are kind and gentle and strong, and when I am with you, I feel safe and happy and alive. I have not felt those things in so long." Ethan took her hands in his. "I love you too, Penelope. I think I have loved you since the moment I opened my door and saw you standing there." "What are we going to do?" "We are going to take our time. We are going to do this right. I will court you properly, and when enough time has passed that you feel comfortable, I will ask you to marry me." "And what if I say yes right now?" "Then I would say you need more time to be sure." "I am not an easy man, Penelope. I have scars inside and out. I have nightmares about the war. Sometimes I wake up shouting, sometimes I cannot speak for hours. I drink too much when I go to town, and I have a temper I have to work to control. You think I do not have my own scars? Do you think losing everything, watching my husband die slowly, having to give up my home and my life, has left me undamaged?" She squeezed his hands. "We are both broken, Ethan. Maybe we can heal each other." He kissed her then, softly, carefully, as if she were something precious that might shatter. She kissed him back, and it felt like coming home after a long journey. The winter passed in a haze of happiness. Ethan finished the addition, creating a small bedroom for Thomas and a larger room that would be for Penelope. He made furniture and built shelves, working with his hands to create a real home. Penelope taught Thomas his letters and numbers, and in the evenings, she read to them from the books Ethan had collected over the years. Her voice was soft and melodious, and Ethan loved listening to her read. They courted slowly, carefully. Ethan brought her wildflowers when they bloomed in early spring. They walked together in the evenings while Thomas played. They talked for hours, sharing their histories, their dreams, their fears. Ethan told her about the war, about the men he had killed, about the guilt that ate at him. "You did what you had to do," Penelope said. "You were a soldier. That does not make it right." "No, but it makes it understandable. You are not that man anymore, Ethan. I can see the goodness in you. You make me want to be better. You already are better. You saved our lives. You gave us a home. You love my son as if he were your own." And he did. Thomas had become the center of his world along with Penelope. The boy called him Ethan, but sometimes he slipped and said Papa, and Ethan's heart swelled every time. Spring brought new life to the mountain. Penelope planted a garden, and Ethan helped her break the ground and build fences to keep out the deer. They worked side by side, and he loved watching her, the way she pushed her hair back from her face, the way she smiled when a seed sprouted. On a warm evening in May, nearly a year after Penelope had knocked on his door, Ethan took her walking up to a meadow where wildflowers bloomed in riotous color. Thomas ran ahead, chasing butterflies while they walked hand in hand. "Penelope," Ethan said, stopping in the center of the meadow. "I know we said we would take our time, but I cannot wait any longer. I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" She smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and she kissed him back with all the love and passion he had dreamed of. Thomas came running over, and they told him the news. The boy whooped with joy and threw his arms around both of them. "Does this mean you will be my papa for real?" Thomas asked. "If that is all right with you," Ethan said. "It is more than all right. It is perfect." They married in Palisade in June, in the small church with the minister officiating and a handful of townspeople as witnesses. Penelope wore a dress she had made from new fabric Ethan had bought, pale blue that matched her eyes. Ethan wore his new shirt and his best pants, his hair and beard neatly trimmed. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed his bride with all the love in his heart, and the small congregation applauded. Thomas stood beside them as the best man, beaming with pride. They spent their wedding night in the hotel in Palisade, their first real night alone together. Ethan had been with women before, but never with love, never with this depth of feeling. He made love to Penelope slowly, tenderly, learning her body and showing her with his hands and mouth how much he cherished her. Afterward, she lay in his arms, her head on his chest. "I never thought I could feel this way again," she said. "After David died, I thought that part of my life was over." "Are you happy?" "Happier than I have ever been. David was a good man and I cared for him, but what we have, Ethan, this is different. This is deeper. This is real love. I love you, Penelope O'Neill." She smiled at her new name. "I love you too." They returned to the mountain the next day to their home and settled into married life. Penelope moved into the bedroom Ethan had built for her, but she did not sleep there. She slept in his bed, in his arms, and woke up every morning to his kisses. Summer was glorious. The garden flourished, and Penelope put up preserves and pickles, filling the shelves Ethan had built. They took Thomas fishing in the streams and hiking in the high meadows. Ethan taught the boy to ride and to shoot, skills he would need to survive in this wild country. In the evenings, they sat on the porch Ethan had built, watching the sun set over the mountains. Penelope would sew or knit, Ethan would whittle, and Thomas would play at their feet. It was a simple life, but it was full of love and contentment. In August, Penelope told Ethan she was pregnant. He was overcome with joy, picking her up and spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We are. Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it. I am ecstatic. I am thrilled. I am terrified." She laughed. "I am a little terrified too. You have done this before. You know what to expect. Every baby is different, and I was younger then." She was 26 now, still young, but she had lived a hard life. "You are strong and healthy. Everything will be fine." And it was. Penelope bloomed during her pregnancy, her face radiant, her body growing round with new life. Ethan was attentive and careful, making sure she did not overwork, bringing her anything she craved. Thomas was excited about becoming a big brother and talked endlessly about all the things he would teach the baby. Winter came again, and with it, snow and cold. But the cabin was warm and snug, and they were happy. Ethan had laid in supplies for the winter, enough to last them through even the worst storms. They were prepared. In February, on a night when the moon was full and bright, Penelope went into labor. Ethan had ridden to Palisade the week before and brought back the midwife, a capable woman named Martha who had delivered half the babies in the county. She moved into the spare room, and when Penelope's pain started, she took charge with calm efficiency. Ethan was not allowed in the bedroom. He paced the main room with Thomas, trying not to imagine all the things that could go wrong. He had seen women die in childbirth, had seen babies born dead or dying. The fear was a living thing in his chest. But then he heard it, the thin, angry cry of a newborn, and his knees went weak with relief. Martha came out of the bedroom, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. O'Neill. A big, healthy boy, and your wife is doing well." Ethan rushed into the bedroom and found Penelope propped up on pillows, exhausted but smiling, holding a squalling bundle. He sat beside her on the bed and looked down at his son, at the red face and the tiny fists and the shock of dark hair. "He is perfect," Ethan whispered. "He is loud," Penelope said, laughing, "just like his father. What should we name him?" "I thought we could call him Edward after your brother." Ethan felt tears prick his eyes. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. Edward O'Neill, do you like it?" "I love it. Thank you, Penelope." "Thank you for this gift." Thomas came in then, and they let him hold his baby brother. The boy was careful and gentle, and Ethan felt his heart swell with love for his family. The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful. Edward was a good baby, but any baby required work and attention. Ethan helped as much as he could, walking the floor with his son when he cried, changing diapers, doing whatever Penelope needed. He loved being a father. He loved the weight of his son in his arms, the milky smell of him, the way he would stare up at Ethan with wide, solemn eyes. Thomas was a wonderful big brother, always wanting to help, always gentle with the baby. Spring came again, and with it, new growth and new hope. Ethan expanded the garden, and Penelope planted flowers around the cabin, making it beautiful. They worked together to build a future for their children, for the family they were creating. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Penelope leaned against Ethan's shoulder and sighed with contentment. "Are you happy?" he asked, wrapping his arm around her. "I am more than happy. I am blessed. 2 years ago I was at the lowest point of my life. I had lost my husband, my home, everything. I was so scared and so lost. But then I found you. I found you too. You saved me, Penelope. I was dead inside before you came. You brought me back to life." We saved each other. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Thomas play with Edward on a blanket in the grass. The baby was 6 months old now, sitting up and reaching for everything, his laugh a constant source of joy. "You ever regret staying here?" Ethan asked. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had gone to Grand Junction?" "Never. This is where I am meant to be, with you, with our family. I love you, Penelope. I love you too." The years passed in a rhythm of seasons. They added another room to the cabin when Penelope became pregnant again, and their daughter, Elizabeth, was born in the spring of 1874. She had Penelope's dark hair and Ethan's green eyes, and she was the light of their lives. Thomas grew tall and strong, learning to trap and hunt with Ethan. He was 12 now, on the cusp of becoming a man, and Ethan was proud of the person he was becoming. He was kind and responsible, good with his younger siblings, and quick to learn. Edward was a wild child, always running and climbing and getting into trouble. He kept them on their toes, but his laughter filled the cabin with joy. Elizabeth was quieter, more thoughtful, content to sit on Penelope's lap and listen to stories. Ethan and Penelope's love deepened with time. They knew each other's rhythms and moods, could communicate with a look or a touch. Their passion had not dimmed. If anything, it had grown stronger, tempered by the trials they had faced together. In the summer of 1875, Ethan took his family to Palisade for the Independence Day celebration. It was a rare trip, and the children were excited. They watched the fireworks and ate ice cream and danced in the town square. As Ethan waltzed with Penelope under the stars, she smiled up at him. "Do you remember the first time we danced, at our wedding? You stepped on my toes 3 times. I am a better dancer now. You are better at many things." He pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I cannot believe how lucky I am. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and just watch you sleep, and I think about how close I came to missing all of this. If you had not knocked on my door that night, if I had not heard you, but you did hear me, and you opened your door and your heart. That is who you are, Ethan. You are a good man. I am a better man because of you." They danced until the music stopped, then gathered their children and made the long journey back to the mountain. Thomas rode his own horse now, and Edward sat in front of Ethan on the saddle, chattering about all the things he had seen. Penelope carried Elizabeth, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder. When they reached the cabin, Ethan looked at it with satisfaction. It was a real home now, not the rough bachelor quarters it had been when he first built it. It had rooms and windows, a wide porch and a barn. Penelope's flowers bloomed in neat beds, and the garden was lush with vegetables. They put the children to bed and sat on the porch with mugs of coffee, watching the stars come out. "I want to build a schoolhouse," Ethan said suddenly. Penelope looked at him in surprise. "A schoolhouse? There are more families moving into the area. The Hendersons down in the valley have 3 children and the Morgans have 5. The children need education, and it is too far for them to go to Palisade every day." "That is a wonderful idea, but who would teach? You could. You taught Thomas to read and write, and you are doing the same with Edward. You would be a fine teacher." Penelope considered this. "I would like that. I would like to help other children." "Then we will do it. I will talk to the other families, see if they want to help build it. We can have it ready by fall." And they did. Ethan rallied the neighboring families, and together they built a small schoolhouse near the base of the mountain, close enough to Ethan's cabin that Penelope could walk there, but accessible to the valley families as well. Penelope became the teacher, and she was wonderful at it, patient and kind, demanding but fair. Thomas helped her with the younger children, and Ethan felt pride watching his son teach a boy to read or help a girl with her mathematics. He was going to be a good man, and Ethan knew that was in large part due to Penelope's influence. In 1876, Penelope gave birth to another son, James. The birth was harder than the others, and Ethan was terrified, pacing outside while Martha the midwife worked. But Penelope was strong, and she came through it well. James was a healthy baby, smaller than Edward had been, but with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. 4 children, Penelope said, exhausted but happy as she nursed the baby. "We have quite a family. Is it too many?" Ethan asked, worried. The birth had frightened him. "No, it is perfect, but I think we should be done now." "Agreed. I cannot go through that again. I aged 10 years tonight," she laughed. "You are only 34, you can spare the years. I want to spend every year I have left with you." "You will. I am not going anywhere." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The schoolhouse thrived, with children from all over the area attending. Penelope was beloved by her students and their parents. Ethan continued to trap and hunt, providing meat and furs to trade in Palisade. He also began raising cattle, using the high meadows for grazing. Thomas turned 16 and announced that he wanted to join Ethan in the cattle business. Together, they built up the herd, driving cattle to market in Grand Junction once a year. It was hard work, but it was profitable, and Ethan was able to put money aside for the future. Edward was 10 now, still wild but maturing, helping with the cattle and the farm work. Elizabeth was 7, quiet and studious, always with a book in her hand. James was a toddler, getting into everything, keeping Penelope busy. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan took Penelope back to Palisade, leaving the children with Thomas. They stayed in the same hotel where they had spent their wedding night, and Ethan made love to his wife with all the passion and tenderness of their first time. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Penelope traced the scars on his chest, the marks of war and hard living. "Do you still have nightmares?" she asked. "Sometimes, but not as often. You chase them away." "I am glad. You deserve peace, Ethan." "I have peace. I have you and the children and our home. I have everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed of." "I feel the same way. When I think about that night when I knocked on your door, I cannot believe how much my life has changed. I was so scared and so desperate. I thought I was going to die. I am glad you knocked. I am glad I heard you. I am glad I opened my door, and your heart, and my heart." They returned to the mountain the next day, to their children and their life, and Ethan felt a deep satisfaction. He had fought in a terrible war, had seen and done things that haunted him, had spent 5 years alone on a mountain trying to outrun his demons. But Penelope had saved him. She had brought him back to life, had given him a family and a purpose. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Thomas grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, kind and patient like his mother. At 18, he began courting a girl from one of the Valley families, a sweet-natured girl named Sarah Morgan, and Ethan gave his blessing. Edward was 15 and still a handful, but he was learning responsibility. Elizabeth was 12 and wanted to be a teacher like her mother. James was 7 and the baby of the family, doted on by his siblings. Ethan and Penelope had weathered storms and drought, harsh winters and hot summers, illness and injury. Through it all, their love had remained constant, the foundation on which everything else was built. On a crisp autumn evening in 1881, Ethan sat on the porch with Penelope, watching the sun set over the mountains. The colors were spectacular, orange and pink and purple painting the sky. "You remember the night we met?" Penelope asked. "Every detail. The knock on the door. The blizzard. The way you looked, half frozen and desperate. I remember the way you looked at me like I was something precious. You are. You saved my life that night. You saved mine too. I was already dead, I just had not realized it yet. You brought me back to life." She leaned against him and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "We have built a good life, haven't we? The best life. I wake up every morning grateful for you, for our children, for this place we call home. I love you, Ethan O'Neill. I love you, Penelope O'Neill, forever and always." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon and the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. Inside the cabin, they could hear the children laughing, the sounds of home and family. Thomas married Sarah Morgan in the spring of 1882, and they built a small cabin on the other side of the mountain, close enough to visit but far enough to have their own life. A year later, they gave Ethan and Penelope their first grandchild, a boy they named after Ethan. Ethan held his grandson in his arms and looked at Penelope, at the woman who had knocked on his door during a blizzard 15 years earlier and changed his life forever. She smiled at him, her eyes full of love, and he knew that every choice he had made, every hardship he had endured, had been worth it for this moment. Edward followed in his brother's footsteps, taking over more of the cattle operation as Ethan grew older. Elizabeth became a teacher at the schoolhouse when Penelope decided to retire, and James showed signs of becoming a fine horseman and rancher. The years were kind to Ethan and Penelope. They grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces lined with the marks of a life well lived. But their love never faded. If anything, it grew stronger, deeper, more precious with each passing year. They had grandchildren and then great-grandchildren, and the cabin on the mountain became a gathering place for the whole family. Ethan added rooms and built more cabins nearby to accommodate everyone when they came to visit. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the schoolhouse. The whole community came, bringing food and music and laughter. Ethan and Penelope danced under the stars, just as they had on the night of their wedding, and Ethan marveled at how much his life had changed. "You have any regrets?" Penelope asked as they swayed to the music. "Not a single one. You. Only that I did not find you sooner. We found each other when we were meant to. Everything that came before brought us to that moment, to that knock on the door. The best decision I ever made was knocking on that door. The best decision I ever made was opening it." They danced until they were tired, then sat with their children and grandchildren, telling stories and sharing memories. Ethan looked around at all the faces, at the family he and Penelope had created, and felt a deep and abiding satisfaction. He had been a soldier and a mountain man, a trapper and a rancher, but his greatest achievement was this: he had loved and been loved. He had opened his heart to a desperate widow and her son, and they had given him everything he had ever wanted. As the party wound down and people began to leave, Ethan and Penelope walked back to their cabin hand in hand. The moon was full and bright, lighting their way, and the night was full of the sounds of the mountains they loved. Inside, Ethan built up the fire while Penelope made them tea. They sat in their chairs, the same chairs they had sat in for 25 years, and looked at each other with all the love and tenderness of a quarter-century together. "Thank you," Ethan said. "For what? For knocking on my door, for staying, for loving me, for giving me a life beyond anything I imagined. Thank you for opening your door, for taking us in, for loving me and Thomas as if we had always been yours, for being the man I needed, the father my children needed, the grandfather our grandchildren adore. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. So would I." They sat in comfortable silence, sipping their tea, listening to the fire crackle. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. It was the sound of the wild, the sound of the mountains, the sound of home. Ethan and Penelope O'Neill had found each other in a blizzard, two broken people seeking shelter from different storms. They had built a life together on that mountain, a life full of love and laughter, hardship and triumph, joy and sorrow. They had raised children and grandchildren, built a community, and created a legacy that would last for generations. And every night, when Ethan lay down beside his wife and pulled her into his arms, he whispered a prayer of thanks for the knock that had changed everything, for the door he had opened, and for the woman who had walked through it and into his heart. Years continued to pass, each season bringing its own rhythm to life on the mountain. Ethan was in his 50s now, his beard more gray than brown, his movements a little slower but still strong. Penelope's dark hair had threads of silver running through it, and laugh lines creased the corners of her eyes, but to Ethan, she was as beautiful as the day he had first seen her. Their children were all grown with families of their own. Thomas and Sarah had 4 children and ran a successful cattle operation. Edward had married a girl from Grand Junction and moved there to start a freight business, but he visited often. Elizabeth had married the schoolteacher from Palisade and had 2 children, continuing the family tradition of education. James, now 23, was still unmarried but courting a rancher's daughter from the valley. The cabin had grown over the years into a sprawling home with multiple wings and additions. It was no longer the simple structure Ethan had built with his own hands, but a testament to the life they had created together. Every room held memories, every corner echoed with laughter. On a summer evening in 1892, Ethan and Penelope sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Penelope was knitting a blanket for their newest great-grandchild, and Ethan was whittling a toy horse for another. "You ever think about that first night?" Penelope asked, not looking up from her knitting. Ethan smiled. They had this conversation often, returning to that pivotal moment like a touchstone. "Every day, I think about how close we came to missing each other. If the wind had been a little louder, if I had been asleep instead of by the fire, if you had chosen a different path up the mountain." "God brought us together," Penelope said with certainty. "I believe that. After David died, I prayed every night for guidance, for help, for hope. And then that storm came and I saw the smoke from your chimney and I knew I had to try to reach you. It was divine providence." "I am not a particularly religious man," Ethan said, "but I cannot argue with you. What we have found together, it feels like more than luck or chance. It is love. Pure and simple. The kind of love that saves and transforms and endures." Ethan set down his whittling and moved to sit beside Penelope on the bench they had built together years ago. He took her hand, feeling the familiar warmth of her touch, the calluses from years of hard work, the wedding band that had never left her finger. "I want to tell you something," he said. "I have never been good with words, not like you are, but I need you to understand what you mean to me." Penelope set down her knitting and turned to face him, her brown eyes soft with love. "I know what I mean to you, Ethan. You show me every day. Let me say it anyway. Before you came, I was existing but not living. I had convinced myself that I did not deserve happiness, that the things I had done in the war had marked me forever. I thought I would die alone on this mountain, and I had made my peace with that. But then you knocked on my door and everything changed. You did not just save my life, Penelope. You gave me a reason to live. You gave me love and family and purpose. You made me believe I could be more than my past, more than my mistakes. You made me whole." Tears streamed down Penelope's face. "Oh, Ethan, you did the same for me. I was so lost and scared and broken. I thought my life was over at 24. But you took me in, you protected me, you loved me. You loved Thomas as your own son, never once making him feel less than your other children. You gave me strength when I had none, hope when I was drowning in despair. You are the love of my life, and I thank God every day for that blizzard that drove me to your door." They kissed then, as they had kissed 1,000 times before, but it still felt new and precious. When they pulled apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "Promise me something," he said. "Anything. Promise me that when my time comes, you will not grieve too long. Promise me you will remember the happiness, not the loss." "Ethan, do not talk like that. You are strong and healthy. We have years left together. We do not know that. Life is uncertain. I just want you to know that if I go first, I will have died a happy man. I will have had more love and joy than I ever deserved. And I want you to be happy too, even without me." Penelope shook her head, fresh tears falling. "I cannot imagine life without you. You are strong, Penelope. The strongest person I know. You survived things that would have broken most people. You will survive me if you have to, but I hope that is many years away. I want to hold our great-great-grandchildren. I want to grow old and creaky with you by my side. I want 1,000 more evenings just like this one. Then we will have them. We will have all of them." And they did. The years continued to unfold, each one bringing new joys and occasional sorrows. They lost friends to age and illness, watched the world change around them as the wild frontier became more civilized, saw the railroad come to Colorado and the old ways begin to disappear. But through it all, their love remained constant. They faced every challenge together, celebrated every triumph together, held each other through the dark times and danced together in the light. Their family grew and flourished. Great-grandchildren became great-great-grandchildren. The O'Neill name became well known in the region, synonymous with integrity and hard work and strong family values. Ethan taught his grandsons and great-grandsons to ride and shoot and trap, passing down the skills he had learned over a lifetime in the mountains. Penelope taught her granddaughters and great-granddaughters to read and sew and keep a home, but also to be strong and independent, to use their minds and their voices. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the family gathered at the cabin for a massive celebration. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren filled every room and spilled out onto the porches and into the yard. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, stories and memories shared. Ethan, now 61, stood with Penelope, now 53, and looked out at the crowd of people they had created together. From that desperate widow with one small child had come this enormous, loving family. From that lonely mountain man had come a legacy of love. Thomas, now in his 40s with silver threading through his hair, stood to make a toast. "To my mother and my father," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I do not remember my birth father well. I was too young when he died, but Ethan has been my father in every way that matters. He taught me to be a man, to be honest and kind, to work hard and love deeply. And my mother taught me to be strong, to persevere, to never give up even when things seem impossible. Together, you have shown all of us what love looks like, what family means, what it is to build a life worth living. We are all here because of you, because of the love you have shared. Thank you for everything." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Ethan pulled Penelope close, kissing the top of her head as she wept happy tears against his chest. That night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Ethan and Penelope lay together in their bed, wrapped in each other's arms. The window was open and they could hear the familiar sounds of the mountain, the wind in the pines, the distant call of an owl. 40 years, Penelope murmured. "Can you believe it? It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once," Ethan replied. "I remember everything about you from that first night. The way your lips were blue from the cold. The way you said 'my son,' and I knew you would fight to your last breath for Thomas. The way you looked at me the next morning, like maybe I was not as scary as you had feared. You were never scary. You were kind from the very beginning. I am glad you think so. I felt like a bear, all rough and uncivilized after so many years alone." "You were a little rough around the edges," Penelope admitted with a smile. "But I saw the man underneath. I saw the goodness in you." They lay in comfortable silence for a while, and then Ethan spoke again. "I want you to know that these 40 years with you have been the best years of my life. Every morning I wake up grateful. Every night I go to sleep content. You have given me everything, Penelope, everything. And you have given me the same. We saved each other, Ethan. We built this beautiful life together from nothing but love and determination. I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I." They fell asleep like that, wrapped together, their hearts beating in rhythm after 40 years of loving each other. The years moved forward as they always do. Ethan and Penelope celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by 4 generations of family. Ethan was 71 now, his body showing the wear of a hard life but his mind still sharp, and his love for Penelope as strong as ever. Penelope was 63, her hair completely white but her smile as bright as it had been at 24. They walked more slowly now, and they spent less time working and more time sitting on the porch watching the world go by. But they were together, always together, and that was what mattered. On a spring morning in 1906, Ethan woke with pain in his chest. He did not tell Penelope, not wanting to worry her, but she knew him too well to be fooled. "You are hurting," she said, her hand on his face. "Tell me where." "It is nothing, just old age catching up with me. Ethan, do not lie to me, not after all these years, he sighed. My chest. It hurts when I breathe. Penelope sent James, who still lived nearby, to fetch the doctor from Palisade. By the time the doctor arrived, Ethan was struggling to breathe. The doctor examined him and spoke quietly to Penelope. His heart is weak, the doctor said. At his age, there is not much we can do except keep him comfortable. Penelope nodded, her face pale but composed. She sat beside Ethan's bed, holding his hand, refusing to leave his side. The family gathered, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren filling the house, all wanting to say goodbye to the man who had meant so much to all of them. Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness, but whenever he opened his eyes, Penelope was there, her hand in his, her face close to his. "Do not leave me," she whispered. "Please, Ethan, do not leave me." "I do not want to," he said, his voice weak. "But I do not think I have a choice, my love. We have had such a beautiful life together. The most beautiful. No regrets, Penelope, not one. I have a regret. I regret that we do not have more time. We have had 54 years. That is more than most people get, and I have loved every moment of it." He struggled to breathe, to get the words out. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me. You and Thomas and our children and this life we built. I die a happy man. Do not talk about dying. Fight, Ethan, please fight. I am tired, love, so tired, and I am not afraid. How can I be afraid when I know I have been so blessed? When I know I have loved and been loved so completely?" Penelope was weeping now, great sobs shaking her body. "I cannot do this without you." "Yes, you can. You are the strongest person I have ever known. You will go on and you will find joy again. Promise me you will find joy again." "I promise," she whispered, though she did not know how she would keep that promise. Ethan smiled, and with his last strength he pulled her down and kissed her. "I love you, Penelope O'Neill, forever and always." "I love you too, forever and always." He closed his eyes then, still smiling, still holding her hand. His breathing grew slower and slower, and then, as the sun rose over the mountains he had called home for more than 50 years, Ethan O'Neill took his last breath and was gone. Penelope stayed beside him for a long time, holding his hand, memorizing his face, saying goodbye to the man who had been her whole world for more than half her life. The family gave her space, letting her grieve in her own way. Finally, Thomas came in and gently lifted his mother from the bedside. "Come, Mama. Let us take care of him now." She let him lead her away, and the family prepared Ethan's body for burial. They buried him on the mountain he loved, in a spot with a view of the valley below and the peaks above. The whole community came to pay their respects to a man who had been a friend and neighbor, a father and grandfather, a good and decent man who had lived a life of integrity and love. Penelope stood beside the grave, supported by her children, and spoke her final goodbye. "You opened your door to me on the worst night of my life, and you gave me everything. You gave me love and safety and a family. You gave me a home and a future. You were my partner and my best friend, my lover and my rock. I will miss you every day for the rest of my life, but I will not despair, because I know how lucky I was to have you. I will honor your memory by living fully, by loving our family, by finding joy as you made me promise. Until we meet again, my darling. Until we meet again." The months after Ethan's death were hard. Penelope felt his absence like a physical wound, an emptiness that nothing could fill. But she kept her promise to him. She let herself grieve, but she did not let the grief consume her. She found joy in her children and grandchildren, in the changing seasons, in the small beauties of everyday life. She remained in the cabin on the mountain, refusing to move despite her children's concerns. "This is my home," she said firmly. "This is where Ethan and I built our life. I will not leave it." So they made sure she was cared for, taking turns staying with her, making sure she had food and firewood and company. And gradually, Penelope found a new rhythm to her life, a life without Ethan but still full of love. She lived for another 12 years, dying peacefully in her sleep at the age of 75. Her children buried her beside Ethan on the mountain, and on her headstone they carved the words she had requested. She knocked. He opened. Love happened. The cabin on the mountain remained in the family for generations, a testament to the love story that had begun there. And every year, on the anniversary of that fateful blizzard night, the family gathered to remember Ethan and Penelope, to tell their story to the newest generation, to keep alive the memory of the widow who knocked during a blizzard and the mountain man who opened his door and his heart. Their love had started with a desperate knock and an act of kindness, but it had grown into something extraordinary, something that transcended death and lived on in the hearts and lives of all those they had touched. It was a love story for the ages, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope and love can find a way. And somewhere on that mountain, in the whisper of the wind through the pines and the warm glow of firelight in the windows, Ethan and Penelope's love lived on, eternal and unbreakable, a beacon of hope for all who came after.